Good morning, everybody. Hey, we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome to day 2 of the conference. I hope everybody enjoyed the first day. Second day is going to be awesome as well. So let's get right into it. We're going into a rapid rehousing session. And first, I'd like to thank the folks that are going to be presenting today. We have Robin from Catholic Social Services. She's going to be our first presenter, talking about the great stuff they're doing. And then I'm going to hop in for just a couple minutes and talk about the new rapid rehousing program that's going to be happening in Fairbanks. And then Glenna, who runs the SSVF program in Fairbanks, I saw that she was in the room. And honestly, whenever I have a question about rapid rehousing, I go to Glenna. So I begged and pleaded for her to step up here. So with zero notice, she's stepping up to the plate. So thank you very much, Glenna. And then we have John Rossi from the Valley. You're going to be talking about the great stuff that they're doing as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. And it's all yours, Robin.
Good morning. So my name is Robin Dempsey. I'm the Director of Homeless Family Services with Catholic Social Services. And basically we are a housing intervention service, and we span 3 programs at Catholic Social Services. So we have the Brother Francis Shelter, which is the largest shelter in the state. It serves single individuals 18 and older. We have Clare House, which is an emergency shelter for women with children and expectant mothers. And then we have a community-based case management group, and they serve people who are both sheltered and unsheltered within the community. So I'm just going to do kind of a quick overview of rapid rehousing, and then I'll kind of get into what we're doing at Catholic Social Services. Okay, so basically rapid rehousing is an immediate response to the crisis of homelessness. It provides individuals and families with an opportunity to get their basic needs met so that they can begin to regain control of their lives. It uses a housing first model, so the idea here is that there are no prerequisites to being housed. They don't need income, they don't need to be sober. The idea really is that all people can achieve housing stability with varying degrees of support, and that everyone is considered housing ready. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Just, oh, it's Lisa. Okay. It's also, I think, important to know what rapid rehousing is not. And it is not a solution to the affordable housing problem, and it's not a solution to the problem of poverty. In fact, what we often find is that participants who are in a rapid rehousing program, once they are at that point where they can actually pay for their rent, they're typically paying 70 to 80% of their income towards their rent. So for Catholic Social Services, we have a variety of grants that are specific to rapid rehousing. So we have a supportive services for veterans families grant. Obviously, this is a federal grant. We have 3 community-based grants. 2 of them are from Providence. One is a community housing project for families. This is a grant that is specific to families, and we actually share it with 2 other agencies within our community. So the Kennel House, which is another shelter here in town, and Rural Cap are also folks that we share that particular grant with. And then we have the Providence Housing Project for individuals. So again, this specifically targets individuals. Most of the folks that come up for this grant are participants at the Brother Francis Shelter. And then we have a new grant called Path to Independence, and this is a grant that is kind of unique in that we had a private landlord and Cook Inlet Housing approach us to work together to house people in their specific units. So this is something that we've actually just gotten started on. We've housed I think we've housed 7 people with this grant so far, and we just started housing people with that particular grant in October, just the beginning of last month. So for us, the way that rapid rehousing works is that all of our grants take people, we take referrals from the coordinated entry list. So we have the by name list here in Anchorage. We get our referrals, and for the most part, for the rapid rehousing referrals, there are certain criteria. One of them is that we're looking for people with a VI SPDAT score between 4 and 8. We provide intensive case management for up to a year, and that's a really essential piece of our program. And we provide financial support typically for up to 6 months. Most of our grants, really with the exception of our SSVF grant, we have a predetermined amount of money that we can use per family or individual, and typically it's $6,500. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. The beauty, I think, of most of our grants is that the financial support can be used for anything that really pertains to housing stability. So we can use it towards rent, utilities, car repairs, things like that, anything that will support them in their job searches, keeping employment, and then obviously just keeping their house stable. So there's actually something missing here. Okay, I'm going to go back for a second. This is some of the results, but I do want to talk a little bit about the kind of our process, because we do have kind of 3 really core components that are very specific to rapid rehousing. One of them is just finding housing, making sure that we're working with landlords. Obviously, the folks that we serve have a lot of barriers, so we spend a lot of time really developing and building those landlord relationships. The financial assistance, again, is a really huge piece to the puzzle. We're very transparent with the amount of money that we have up front. We like to engage our clients in understanding that there is a limit, but we also want them to know that every month it's not going to be something where they have to worry about whether or not we have the money to pay the next month. So we're clear that it's 6 months, we're clear that it's $6,500, but we're also clear that it's very specific to housing stability. So the idea is not that you have a blank check for $6,500. The idea is that every month you will meet with your case manager and we'll talk about where you are in the process. So if you have gotten a job and you're at the point where you can participate and contribute to the rent, then that's the piece that we will look at for that month. We also are very, really recognize the importance of the case management piece and working very, very closely with our clients. We try to get out in the community with them, make sure that their community supports are in place, and if they're having any issues with any of their community supports, that we can act as a mediator to smooth things over. We have one particular participant right now who our case manager is very involved with that person's employer. The participant has asked us to be involved with the employer, and the employer has a really great relationship with this particular young man. This is somebody who we've just recently housed in our P2I program. And it's great because if this person goes to work and they're having a bad day, the employer will call our case manager, let them know and say, hey, we really think maybe might need to step in a little bit. You might need to talk to them and find out what's going on. So making sure that we are really thoroughly involved with all of the kind of community supports has been a really big piece of our project. Basically, with rapid rehousing, what we have found is that it really has proven to have higher retention rates and lower returns to homelessness. And there is some specific statistics from the VA where they have reported that between 2010 and 2016, rapid rehousing in combination with their VASH program, which is a voucher program, has reduced veteran homelessness by about 47%. So rapid rehousing by far is one of the biggest programs that we have with our Homeless Family Services project, and it's really been fabulous. It's been fabulous to really work really intently with the community partners and shareholders within Anchorage as well. That's it for me.
Thank you. All right, everybody. So yesterday, I'm sure everybody remembers it, when we were over there in the big room and I was talking about the great stuff that Fairbanks is doing. And one of the things that I brought up was our rapid rehousing program. And what we did, the reason that we felt so strongly about doing another rapid rehousing program was we were looking at the data from our 2017 HMIS data, and out of the 1,571 people that received services in Fairbanks, 810 of them did not have a long-term barrier to housing, meaning that the only reason that they were homeless was because of underemployment or unemployment. And so then we're like, well, that's kind of surprising, but at the same time, we started looking at national data, and that's kind of the trend across the country, is that a lot of people when they think of homelessness, they think of that stereotype. They think of somebody who's addicted to drugs, or they think of somebody who is suffering from mental illness or some other sort of debilitating condition that is going to be a long-term barrier to housing. But the data just simply doesn't show that. The data shows that the majority of folks, the problem is really underemployment or unemployment. So we started looking a little bit deeper into the data, and I know there were some ICA folks in here earlier, but they did a great, I asked for some specific data, and they gave us some really awesome data. So we dug into that 810 people without the long-term barrier to see where they ended up leaving as they exited whatever program it was that they were being served at. And what we found was that out of that 810, 170 of them, even though they didn't have a long-term barrier to housing, they were going back into homelessness as they exited whatever program it was. And so then it's like, well, that's kind of a shocking thing. That seems like I believe it was Brian said that's low-hanging fruit. We should be able to take care of that, and I agree that that's something that we should be able to take care of. So we looked at stuff that was going around the nation, like what is working, and the thing that just jumped out that is working across the nation is rapid rehousing, and it's also working in Fairbanks. As I said, Glenda runs our SSVF program, and their primary thing is rapid rehousing, and they're phenomenal. It's amazingly successful. So what we wanted to do was create a general population rapid rehousing program. So we started looking at like the national standards and how it works and what to expect from a rapid rehousing program, and the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness has they have their standards and benchmarks, and one of the things that to meet their standards is 80% of the people that enter a rapid rehousing program, as they exit, they are exiting into permanent housing. So that's a pretty good number, 80%. That's better than a little bit better than most. And then the more shocking thing is out of that 80%, 85% of those folks are housed a year later. They're still housed. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same apartment that they got, but they're still housed. So as a community, we like I said yesterday a couple times yesterday. We, as a community, we came together and we're like, this is a need that we have. Let's make this happen. And so we had a bunch of agencies get together, start planning it out. And what we ended up with was a program called My Place. And the Fairbanks Rescue Mission is running it. As soon as we have a little bit more data in our coordinated entry system, we will use coordinated entry to fill it. But right now, they're still doing the assessment and everything that they would for coordinated entry for it. But we're not using prioritization list yet because we just started collecting data officially yesterday. One of the things that we noticed though was that a lot of the folks that we feel are good candidates for rapid rehousing, they were scoring outside that 4 to 8, and we have just not heartburn with that 4 to 8 standard, because that is a national standard, but we really strongly believe that some of the folks that maybe they score a 9, maybe they're just a little bit more vulnerable, but what we've noticed from the SSVF program and from other programs around the country is that not to get tied up on that number, not to get tied up on the VSBDAT score. So we decided right off the bat with launching My Place that we wanted to use dynamic prioritization. And I know there's a couple sessions on dynamic prioritization here in a little bit, but In case you're not real familiar with it, because I wasn't until a couple months ago, what dynamic prioritization is basically saying that you can go up the scale. So if somebody's a little bit more vulnerable, maybe they come in and maybe they score a 9 or 10 or something, a little bit higher on the VSBDAT score. They have a couple extra barriers, but maybe your case manager maybe they've been working with them, maybe they know them from previous visits or whatever. But for whatever reason, they think that they can take a chance with it. So what we decided is that we're going to make a percentage of the folks that we serve in my place. We're going to make that dynamic prioritization, meaning that the executive director, Roscoe Gaskins from the Fairbanks Rescue Mission, has granted authority to his case managers to make that. They can't go below. If somebody shows up with like a VSBDAT score of 2, then of course they're more of a prevention diversion. But if they show up and they're just a little bit outside that range, but they can, the case managers have a good strong feeling about like a reason why they can serve somebody a little bit more vulnerable, then they have that authorization. So with ours, what we're going to do is our goal is to serve 40 families a year. We just got fully funded, just got staffed. It's a pretty new project. They just started VSBDAting people and doing the assessments a couple weeks ago, and they just picked their first three participants. But they already have, they've already gone through and they've made connections with landlords, and that's an ongoing thing. It's not like just a one-time thing, because you need to keep landlord engagement up. So they've done that. They're starting to work with people. And another one of the goals, one of the benchmarks and standards, is within 30 days of somebody entering the program, they have to be able to get a private market rental of their choosing, within reason, of course. If somebody shows up and maybe it's a single, it's just an individual, no kids attached or whatever, and and they say they want a 3-bedroom. Oh, that's not realistic. You have to have some, talk them into something more realistic. But more important than just helping them get into that private market rental, with the tapering financial support, more important than that, immediately, as soon as they get in, they're brought into intense goal-oriented case management and employment services, something to help get them out of and keep them out of the issues that they're having. And that's the part that, to me, makes it really cool. Just by looking at rapid rehousing, and I'm just for the record, I am not a housing expert of any sort. Like, I was doing something completely different before I started doing this job. I was never a direct service provider. I was never a case manager. I was never any of that stuff. But just looking at from an outside perspective, I'm kind of I like to read like data and all that stuff. But looking at the data, it looks like rapid rehousing is something that can actually work. And more important than that, rapid rehousing is being proven all across the country that folks that otherwise would go into permanent supportive housing, they're candidates for permanent supportive housing. Maybe they've been on that wait list forever, and they're just not getting into that permanent supportive housing. They're finding that rapid rehousing is actually successful for those individuals at almost the same rates as people that score in that 4 to 8 range on the VSBDAT. So I'm really excited about rapid rehousing, and honestly, I think it is this close to being scattered site permanent supportive housing on a much cheaper scale. So for all the communities out there that maybe the smaller communities, like Fairbanks and Juneau and Nome and Kotzebue and all the different places, if you're looking for something that's going to have a lot of bang for your buck, rapid rehousing is one of those things. And don't get discouraged. People will be like, oh, that's the low-hanging fruit. That's the that you're just helping the easier people. That's not the case. You're freeing up resources so that you can help the most vulnerable. And if you're using dynamic prioritization, you're allowed to start going up that list and keep challenging yourself. And that's one of the great things that I like about Glenda's program, and she's going to talk about hers in just a second. But they are helping the more vulnerable people. Some of the folks that I've seen go into Glenda's program, I know without being a direct service provider, not having access to all their scores and stuff, I just know, just from talking to the people, I know that they had to have scored higher than an 8 on the VSBADAT. And she's incredibly successful. I don't want to steal her thunder, but at any rate, rapid rehousing is definitely something that a lot of the a lot of the smaller communities, if you're looking for something that's going to have the most impact on your community, I strongly suggest looking into rapid rehousing. And if anybody's wanting to know more about like how we got it going in Fairbanks, and or you want any of the stuff, you want any of our project management material or any of the stuff that we did, just let me know. And I mean, you can have it. We'll definitely help out any way we can. And with that, I'm going to go to Glenna. And again, I got to thank Glenna again and again and again for stepping up here with literally zero preparation. Thank you, Glenna.
Thank you, Mike. He owes me now, right? Okay, so payback. Good morning. I'm over SSVF. We started the program, and we're now going into our 6th year of the grant. We have a number of that we promised to serve 40 per year, and this last year, which just ended in September, we hit the 40, but all the other years we went over. So we was at probably an average of at least 50 or more per grant year. So that kind of tells you how many veterans are here in Alaska. We can talk about rapid rehousing and all it does, but the success stories is what makes it worth it all. So, we do enter about 75% or higher is at zero income. So we work with them with their resumes, we get them into the job service, we work with DVR, we look at every aspect of their lives and just see where it is that they're needing assistance that can help them become successful and be self-sustaining. So that's our goal. About 4 years ago, I had the privilege of being at SSVF regional meetings where the head person of SSVF was, and I had been pushing to use dry cabins because in the interior and in the Matsu Valley, dry cabins is a popular housing because it is cheap. And so John Coons, which started SSVF and is over SSVF, was there, and I managed to talk to him about dry cabins. He says, send me the information and I'll make a decision. Well, I come back home, and just so happened the Fairbanks Daily News Miner had done a story on how many people live in dry cabins in the interior in Alaska. So I put the link in there. We took pictures of some of the dry cabins because some of the dry cabins are nicer than the apartments are. And within 3 weeks, we were approved. So Alaska is the only state that is able to use dry cabins. We do have extra, because we do have to go by HUD guidelines. And so we did put some extra things in that we said we would not house anybody in a dry cabin unless they had transportation and they had the means to get their own water. So those are the only times that we will use dry cabins. But there is some people that is on fixed income, that's all they can afford. So we want to make sure that when we close them out of our program, they are going to be able to handle their rent after that point. So that's the point that we really focus on. At the Mission, we have grant per diem, and we have HUD-VASH right there. We're all in one hallway, and so we meet weekly to see which program is going to best suit each veteran that comes in, whether they're homeless or whatever their situation is. And yes, we do weekly outreach where we go out and shake the bushes to try to find anybody that is homeless. So we are trying to keep as much on our radar so that we can help as many as we possibly can. We work with them as soon as we get them in. Our goal is to try to get them in some employment or trying to get their income raised. And then we meet with them monthly. At first we start weekly and then we taper off so that we start working as what can they do on the next month. We do not promise them a certain dollar amount, but we say, what can you do? Where is your need for this month? So we take it month by month and we go and start tapering it off at that point. So we know it is a wraparound case management, so we want to make sure that they are involved in getting all the resources within the community that they need so they can move on with their lives. So some wonderful people that we have helped in the past. I ran into one of our single mothers about 2 weeks ago at the grocery store. She was one of our first veterans that we enrolled. She was a single mother with 2 children, and so we helped her get into housing. She got her GI Bill and started going to school, but she got a job, and she is now just telling me she's still at the same job where she was. It's a very good job, and she just bought her house. So it is possible that they could move on. There was a veteran that came. We put him into a dry cabin because he was getting his VA retirement. And with his age, I said, why aren't you getting Social Security? He says, I don't want to pay taxes. I said, well, it might be beneficial for you to see what your income is going to be. It'll probably be more than what the taxes would be. He doubled his income within a month, and he called last summer to try to get some veterans to help him move into his house. He had purchased a house. We had a couple of veterans that was in California. They were calling because one of the spouses was Native and their kids were taken away from them in California. So California had sent them up to the tribal to take care of the children, and they were coming back to try to get reunited with their children. When they got to Fairbanks, we got them housed, and within 30 days, they had their children back. So these success stories is what makes it so valuable. We don't want to just house somebody and then turn around and walk off with them. They know that we're there for them, no matter what it is. And so, we can help somebody within a 2-year time with the rapid rehousing, but we try to make sure that doesn't happen. So we connect them with the other resources in the community. We had one young man that was at the mission from the time he separated from the military. About 6 years he was in and out of the mission. He had long dreadlocks, he wore sloppy clothes, and he wouldn't come into any of the VA programs. And we finally got him in. The first thing he asked for was a haircut. So we took him to the barbershop, got him a shave and a haircut, cleaned him up. We started working with him to get his resume, and he got a security job, and he's still at that job. He didn't keep his housing because sometimes people, when they're homeless, they connect with the people that they are closer to in the mission. So when they get housed, they don't always stay because they start isolating and they start getting lonely. So we have found that not everybody we house is going to stay housed, but we're still giving people the opportunity to make those choices. So, but he's still working, and he's moving forward. So those are just a couple of the people that we have helped over the years. It is an awesome job, but that rapid rehousing, we've been able to get people housed within about 3 to 4 weeks of the time that they're enrolled in our program. And that's working with landlords, going out and meeting with the landlords. Some of the things we found out that if we sit down with the landlord and the renter and go over the lease together, so all 3 of us are on the same page, that's made a big difference. So everybody understands where they all stand, and we make sure that the landlord has our contact information, so if there's any issues, they can call us directly. So we're moving forward. We're going into our 6th year, and we're excited about how many people we can get housed this year.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks again. All right, so next we're going to have John Rossi talking about neighbor to neighbor.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's my privilege to be up here talking to you, representing our Matsu Valley group. We have a very unique way of rapid rehousing people. We actually use transitional housing and putting them into housing. So we use it this way. We have situations where we'll have somebody, we'll put them into housing, put them into an apartment that we feel they can afford eventually, that's cost effective for them. We'll pay the rent for them with contingencies that they're working on saving money, they're working on getting a job, things of that sort. We don't tell them up front that we're going to pay them for a long period of time, because what we found is that they end up not getting that job or not saving money. So what we tell them is, we're going to look at, if you hit these benchmarks within 30 days, let's say you're looking for a job, you've got interviews, whatever the case may be, then we look at paying for the next 30 days. We eventually transition them after they've saved money and they've gotten work to save money. About 60 days later, we start transitioning them into taking over payments for that apartment. So we'll still pay for the apartment, but maybe we'll transition out. Maybe we'll start at 60 days, we'll pay for 50%, and then 25%, and then eventually they take it over. So that's one way that we transition them into permanent housing. Another way is that we put them into a unit that we know that they can't afford, but it's housing for them. And we look for housing that they can afford and do the same kind of thing where they end up getting employment, saving, all those contingencies are in place, and then we transition them into an apartment that they can afford. And those have proven to be very successful for us out in the valley. And what's unique about this is that, see, we don't have a shelter out in the valley. We take people from the situation they're at where they're homeless, or they just became homeless because they've lost that job, whatever the case may be, and we transition them from that situation into being permanently housed. And again, it's been very successful for us out in the valley. And it's been successful because we partner. We partner with each other in the valley, all the different agencies that have certain specialties, whether it be behavioral health, whether it be working with youth, whatever the case may be. We've even worked with the vet program out in the valley so that we can help them help other folks as well. So for us, it is really a combination of transitional housing morphing into rapid rehousing. And it's been extremely successful for us out in the valley doing it that way. Now, one of the things that was mentioned was scattered sites. And out in the valley, we have lots of scattered sites because of our geographic makeup. And so we found that in order for people to get into housing, we have a transportation nightmare out there that hopefully will get remedied within the next 10 years. Who knows what'll happen? We're working on it very hard. But in order for somebody to get housed and also be able to get to work and pay for the rent and all those types of things, we have to get them as close to a core area as possible, or they need to have a vehicle that they can have transportation going back and forth to work. So our biggest obstacle is the transportation piece, because there is affordable housing in areas like Big Lake and Willow and things of that sort, but you need a vehicle in order to get yourself to work and also get yourself housed and things of that sort. So the transportation of the things is the biggest obstacle for us right now. And we've been working with the taxi companies, with Valley Transit, with a variety of different areas. I know Jeff at Salvation Army, he will repair vehicles and get them into service for people so they can actually afford a vehicle. We're looking at that type of situation where we can try to put more cars into circulation for people that are low income that can afford buying a vehicle and end up transporting themselves back and forth. Because again, the affordable housing is out of the core area. And that's a huge challenge, trying to find something inside the core area of Palmer, Wasilla, so that people can afford it. And if they do afford it, it's because they've got multiple people working or they've got a roommate. It's very difficult for somebody to afford it on their own. So with that, nothing more for me to blab to you about. I'll turn it over to Mike.
Thanks, John. All right, so one of the things that we wanted to do with this session is we want to make sure that we left ample time for question and answers, because I know that I've heard from all across the state that there's other communities that currently don't have rapid rehousing that want and need rapid rehousing. So with that, do we have any questions? And Dave Rose has agreed to do this.
Thanks, Mike. This is Mandy in Juneau, and I have like 8 questions, but I'll certainly give other people some time. So when we were talking about barriers, and between a 4 and an 8 on the VI SPDAT, is the VI SPDAT the only barrier assessment that you all do, or do you, I mean, I understand dynamic prioritization means you can kind of put some other factors in, but is there another assessment tool that any of you use to assess barriers?
Hi. So the VI SPDAT is definitely the biggest one because that's part of our coordinated entry process. One of our grants, though, we also use a self-sufficiency matrix. And so on that one, it measures different domains, so how involved somebody is with their community, how connected they are with their families, what their income levels are. There's, I think, 20 domains. So we do use that one for that one particular grant, but other than that, it's just the VI SPDAT.
Thanks. I was actually looking for something like that because I mean, my experience with the VI SPDAT is between a 4 and a 9, you have lots of different levels of engagement.
Yes.
And so I'm trying to, as we put our program together, figure out what's most important, the number, the engagement, the what?
For us, honestly, it's really, I think, more the engagement piece, because what we have found, too, is that even with the self-sufficiency matrix, there are certain areas where they're obviously not going to score high right off the bat, right? We know that they are not housed. We generally know that they don't have an income. So that, that's really reduces their score right off the bat. But I think one of the great things about the self-sufficiency matrix for us, though, is that it does allow us to have those conversations about where they are scoring high, where they are scoring low, so that we can determine, of these domains, which are the ones that you are really the most interested in working on. So it gives us that opportunity to start having those conversations with people.
Yeah, we don't use the VI SPDAT right now, so it's that self-sufficiency matrix that we use, and it's really nice for the same reasons she was talking about. But what we have found is the biggest thing is the buy-in from the client. If we don't have buy-in from the client in some way, then they're not going to be successful. The ones that buy in some way, even if it's paying $50 or $100 to start with on rent, something, they're more successful, and we've seen people stay in housing much longer. The matrix helps us to determine, like she was mentioning, the area that we need to look at to help them the most to succeed. So it's a nice roadmap for us to use.
We have just started using the SPDAT because we're getting the coordinated entry in, but most of our people that have come to us has had felonies, has had other situations that's going on that, they are not going to be able to do it on their own. So it's through talking with them, looking at their barriers, just going through those conversations and just seeing, are you able to get out and get a job, and what are you going to be doing? So we do have a list that we go through, but most of the time we know that they're way off of the radar to even start seeing if they can be self-sufficient. So at the point where we are, because we've been the only rapid rehousing program in Fairbanks until now, with the starting of the new rapid rehousing, there hasn't been anything that that we've really had to look at. We look at them if the barriers are too high that we know they're not going to be self-sufficient. That's when we go to HUD-VASH and trying to get them on with the vouchers. So with grant per diem, with the transitional housing, and with HUD-VASH, we sit down and look together as to where they would be, fit the best, and then we start with that one and go from there.
Well, and that was one of my, you kind of segued into another question. How does the voucher system interact with rapid rehousing? I mean, can you be in the rapid rehousing program and on the waiting list for vouchers, or is that standard?
If they are enrolled in the rapid rehousing, they are still considered homeless. They keep their status. So as long as we have them enrolled, if they're on the voucher list, they can roll into a voucher. There's times that if they know there's a voucher that's coming within a month or two, then we can go ahead and get them housed and then switch them over to the voucher. But if we exit them out of rapid rehousing and they're housed, then they're housed. So that changes the status for the vouchers.
Yeah, well, we've used vouchers in the DV transition program. The COC grant that we have, we've ended up transitioning several women and their children from the program into a voucher situation, and so they've been able to maintain housing in that way. Anything other than that, we have to be really careful. Obviously, anything tied with AHFC is a no-no. So,
Right.
Other than that, do you have anything, Robin?
And, you know, from the DV perspective, the best practices that I've read call for up to a year, but I hear all of you talking about up to 6 months. Can you speak to that? I'll stop talking.
Are you talking about case management or financial assistance? Okay. A lot of that for us is really determined by our grants. So several of our grants do say 6 months. I think the SSVF, does that 9 months? Up to 9 months. But the case management typically extends to a year.
With the SSVF, it depends on what their income category is as to how long you can assist them. But, you know, that's the one thing, we don't always go to the max. There's been a couple that we've had to go to the max. We work with prison reentry as well. So some people that if they've been in prison for several years, trying to do that transition, they're going to need a little bit longer. So actually we had somebody in SSBF use that to the max, and during that time they was able to get their TBRA voucher in, and then they was able to switch over that. So we take it on an individual basis. We sit down and look at where they are, what's going on. Are you going to need to go farther? We're not always rushing to exit somebody. Because you may exit somebody one day and the next week there is a disaster in their life. So then you're having to go back through that. So we do extend our case management a little bit longer in case they're really needing it.
Like Robin was saying, it's a grant-specific timeline. You know, with HAP, it's 3 months, and with ESG, I think it's 9 to 12 months, and with COC HUD, it's even longer than that. So it really is, like they were mentioning, individual specific situations and how they're working things out and how we can help maintain their stability. That's the biggest thing. Are they ready to leave the program because they're stable enough to succeed and maintain housing?
With the new program that we have going in Fairbanks, during the project, in the project charter, we wrote it for a year of case management or up to a year. And the reason for that was using the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness standards and benchmarks. And the reason it's a year is because of youth and DV. They found statistically that takes longer. Actually, with youth, they recommend even longer than a year. But year is still the national standard, I believe.
You mentioned sitting down with landlords and going over the lease with the client. Awesome idea. What other ideas do you folks use to engage private landlords?
We do a landlord appreciation lunch at least once a year. We're working on doing it twice a year. We found that to be very successful, and we have them fill out information on what their apartment rates are. We ask the questions at this luncheon: who will you house, who will you not house? In particular, with ex felons and anybody else that may be what they may consider the unhousable. We ask those pointed questions, and then they're very upfront with us, so we find out which landlords we can contact for whichever the situation happens to be. And they've proven very successful and very informative, not only for our group, but also for the landlords, because at the same time, we're making them aware of what we can do for them, helping keep their tenants housed at the same time. So.
We go and do outreach to the landlords, making ourselves known to them. We also do ready-to-rent classes at the Mission, and so there we would take a form and give to the landlords what is included, what is covered with those classes. And we've actually had landlords that said that if anybody would bring in a certificate that they've gone through the ready-to-rent classes, they would give a break on their deposit. We have one that would said they would take off $200 off of their deposit if they came in and showed their certificate to them. We really make sure that the landlords know we're there for them. Going in and signing an agreement. This is who we are. This is what we do. We're there giving them our business cards so they know they can contact us. We are able with SSVF is because we know sometimes they're not wanting to take a high-risk person, that we would even double the deposit. Just as long as that deposit isn't more than the month's rent, then we can do a double deposit. Or looking at, okay, would you be willing to do them with the first and last month rent plus a deposit? So just, it's going to be that individual relationship with the landlords, because some would say, sure, we could do it with a double deposit of first and last month's rent. Others say no, because they're getting used to us and they know our programs, so they may not require that. But if there's any new ones, then we want to make sure that they feel comfortable that they're not in this by themselves.
I would echo everything you guys just said. We also have a new project, though, which I mentioned briefly, which is this Path to Independence project. And it's P2I is what we call it. And I think it's an innovative project, and it's one where one of our local landlords, Widener and Cook Inlet, have partnered, and they came to our agency. And so we're working together. And a big part of this is that the landlords have identified, they have several scattered site buildings throughout the city. They've identified several different apartment complexes. And then we're getting our folks off of the coordinated entry as we do with the other grants. But with this particular one, they've created a business model that they hope to expand on, and they hope to bring more independent landlords in the future. But there's kind of three pieces to this that are kind of unique. One is that they have a landlord liaison. So they have someone who's very specific that works between the agencies. That person is the one that will identify the open apartments. They will sit down with our case manager and the participant, do the same things that we talked about in terms of going over the lease. They're doing the ready-to-rent classes. And if there's an issue at any point at one of the apartment buildings with any of our participants, the landlord liaison will get involved and work in conjunction with our case manager to kind of mitigate whatever's going on. The other piece of that I think is really interesting about this program is that they've created a landlord risk pool, and essentially they're not asking for the security deposit up front, but the security deposits are going into a landlord risk pool. And so if there is any issue further down the line, if somebody does do damage to that apartment, monies can come out of this risk pool to actually help with those damages. And then one other piece that they have put into this is called the LEAP program. And so this particular grant, we're going to be housing 40 people throughout the course of this year. And 25% of them, so 10 of those folks, are going to be invited to work with the landlords in their employment program. So they actually have an employment program where they are teaching people how to be project managers, to be housing managers. So there's an employment piece that's actually built into this. So it's a pretty exciting project, and one that the Widener Group, I think, is hoping to actually take nationwide, because they have properties throughout the United States. So it's kind of a unique project we're working on.
Hello, Rhonda from Nome, and I actually have two questions not related. One is, we don't have a coalition right now, housing coalition in our community, and I'm wondering, for folks who do you have landlords on your coalition? And then the second question is, when they start contributing towards their rent, how is that done? Are they actually paying the landlord and you're paying the difference, or are they paying you and you're still paying the full amount?
I can answer the coalition question. In Fairbanks, we don't, our coalition, we try to keep it as low barrier and like informal as possible. I think that if you start having, like membership dues and stuff like that you're just going to lose people. But to answer the question, yeah, we do have landlords that will pop in and go to meetings, or that we can reach out to. I wish they were more involved, but the important thing is they're involved with the programs. But we do have them show up from time to time, or they'll call the office or that sort of thing. But again, we try to keep it as low barrier as possible, so that anybody can just come in and go.
We do have actually a big landlord involved in our coalition. That's VRS, Valley Residential Services. John Weaver's on our coalition board. And we have some other landlords that are part of the coalition as well. We're trying to link in funders and other folks that would help with getting people into housing, transportation, all those types of things that we consider to be barriers. Department of Labor that would help. We're trying to pull those people in so that we can get an inside track and try to find out ways that we can eliminate those barriers that people keep communicating to us on. One thing I wanted to mention when I was talking about transitional housing, we used to use hotels quite a bit as a transition, and we would pay for a month in a hotel. That has really gone away. We've only got one hotel in the valley that will work with us, and primarily working with Salvation Army. There was a hotel that was a 30 bed unit that was right across from the state fairgrounds, and if you've been in Palmer and looked across the street at the fairgrounds, you see that it's no longer there because they're enlarging the Glen Highway. So we work to try to get that housing, get it maintained or remaining, and as you could probably see, we weren't successful, so unfortunate.
We do have a homeless veterans subcommittee meeting that we invite landlords to come to. They have in the past, but they're not always interested in continuing being a part of that. So when they show up, we're pleased, and when they don't, they don't. We are a two-person program, so my case manager is sitting right back there. So him and I do all the legwork. And it's just building those relationships. If we run into anybody in the grocery store or on the street or whatever, we try to make those connections. We also hand carry each month's rent to the landlord. So we're making that connection when we go and pay the rent. We're letting them know ahead of time, we're paying this portion, the rent participant will be in to pay, and we let them know how much they're going to be covering. And if they don't come in, we want to make sure that we know that, and then we can contact the veteran to see what is going on. So those monthly connections is how we just keep it going, so they know our faces and they know we're going to be there. We go in a week prior to that rent being due. We do not wait until the due date and go in and try to get things taken care of. We do it ahead of time.
I agree. We pretty much do all the same things that they're doing as well.
Did she also ask about how payments work? I thought I could do it. She just said they pay part. Okay, part, but like the actual physical.
Yeah, so whenever, yeah, well, so we do a couple of things. A lot of it is dependent on the landlord as well. Some landlords just like to come to our building and pick up the check every month. So we find out what their preference is. So they'll either come to our property to pick it up. Our landlords will go to them, but I think Glenn is absolutely right in the sense that it's a great opportunity for us at that moment to have that contact with the landlord. We also let them know what the percentage is that we'll be paying and what the percentage is that the participant will be paying, and then the participant will make their payment directly to the landlord. Yeah.
And if they don't make their portion?
Right, so no question, if they don't make their portion, the landlord will come and talk to us. And then it's a conversation with the client. So, but typically and I'd say that really over the past few months, we have made some changes in the way that we're working with this. So we really do require that the participant comes and talks to us a good 2 weeks before the rent is due, because we need to just reassess at that moment. What is your capability? You know, do you have the ability to pay your rent this month? Do you not have the ability to pay the rent this month? And it's tricky. I mean, obviously so much of that is dependent on that relationship with the case manager, because you want them to feel like there's no judgment, that, you know, whatever their need is, that they can be honest in talking about that, because you don't want that surprise at the end of the month, and you want them to feel like they can just really be open with you about what their need is. So if it does happen that they don't pay that rent at that time, then that's just an opportunity that we'll go back, talk to them, and really just find out what's going on.
And we do, they come in, the participants will meet with the case manager about 2 weeks before their rent is due, and that's gone over. What can you pay this month? What is going to be your portion? So they actually know how much their portion is going to be, and that they're to take it directly to the landlord. So when we get there, we want to make sure that they're getting that portion covered. Very rarely have we had a part where they did not pay their portion of it. But if that comes up to, then we look at, see what the reason is, and if that is a valid reason why they are not able to do that, then we will cover that portion. We are a small organization, so it's not that we have to wait 2 or 3 weeks to get a check cut. I can take the paperwork straight to the bookkeeper and get it taken care of, and with the signatures and everything, we have those available within a day or two. So it makes it a little bit easier for us.
As far as the portion that the client would pay, we as part of that contingency piece, that buy-in, they will pay their portion, whatever it happens to be, first. And based off them bringing a receipt, showing it to a case manager, hey, I've paid my portion, then we pay the balance, whatever that happens to be. That's been the most successful. If we say we're going to go ahead and pay $800 of the $1,000, and then we find out they haven't paid their $200, we're already out the $800, and there's no leverage at all to see that they are buying in and wanting to make a difference in their own lives to get permanently housed. So we have that contingency in place as well, and it's proven successful, and they've maintained housing.
I work for my name is Takita, and I work as a transition coordinator for the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness now. But Robin Dempsey on your panel used to be my supervisor at CSS, Catholic Social Services. And I was one of the case managers at Catholic Social Services that worked with families on rapid rehousing. And it's very important that you establish that rapport with the family as well as the landlord at the beginning. So what I did was actually meet with the landlord first, then I met with the family, then I met with them together. And once we were able to find an apartment that fit the family's needs and wants, we actually did a rental subsidy schedule. So once that family signed the ROI, the release of information, so that I can have an ongoing relationship and communicative relationship with that landlord, then I was able to give the landlord a copy of that rental subsidy schedule, as well as the family a copy of that rental subsidy schedule, so both parties knew what was due each month. And like John said, I did wait till the family was able to bring me that receipt stating that they paid their portion of rent before I did the check request for the landlord's portion. And having that monthly contact with the family is extremely important. I had families on my caseload that were actively work searching. Some of them had secured employment. So they were constantly bringing me in pay stubs so I know that they can afford their rent for the following month. So, and then having that rapport with the landlord ongoing, having them come into CSS and actually meet with me, and I checked in, how is the family doing? Have there been any reports of any violations to the lease? How is the kids? Have you seen the kids in the apartment? So just having that ongoing relationship and following up with having them know exactly what their portion is for each month is extremely important.
In MAD2, our case managers actually asked to see the bank statements also. So it's all transparent.
Denise Gilroy, Nome, Alaska. I'm curious about community service. I assist people in housing and jobs that are either elder or experiencing a disability. I'm an independent living center. One of the things that I require is that people put an effort towards community service, because what I have found is that if you're not actively looking for a job, sometimes when you're out doing community service, you fall into a job. More people have gotten jobs that way than us just going out doing searches, because they're not always familiar with how you go do a search. But if you help someone hook them up with a community service, it's something that becomes routine for them, and then they can prove that they've done a good job and that they can show up and all things are good. More times than not, they end up getting hired. The thing I battle with on a personal level and with the business is when people do community service, they want to make $50 an hour. They think that that's what their time is equal to. And I'm not in the position to tell someone you're not equal to $50 an hour. How inappropriate for me to do that. So my curiosity is there anyone else in the room that takes on that approach? And if you do community service, how do you equal that out to pay for rent? Because that's what I do. I will say, okay, so if you do this many hours in community service, this is the amount that you have earned in your rent. So not only are they earning that, which really feels great for everyone, it's very warm and fuzzy and feels good, but I can't always afford to pay someone $50. And I don't want misconceptions that they're gonna go out in the world and work at the store doing groceries and make $50 an hour, right? So I'm just curious if there's anyone else that does that community service exchange, and how do you do that and pay?
I think that's a wonderful idea, and it's something that I would have to defer to case managers on to see if they have anything that they do that's similar to that. And just a small little plug, the following meeting, for the Matsu. We're going to be doing several case studies that you'll all be involved with, and I think out of that you may get some answers to that question.
We don't do the community service, which might be a good idea for us to do it. One thing that we really push people, if they haven't worked for a while and they don't have that, is start at the bottom. It's not always starting at the top. We have people that, you know, feel like they should make $50 an hour, but they haven't worked for 5 years. Well, that's kind of unrealistic. So we make sure that they go to job service. We make sure that they are checking out everything else that's going on in the community, but also encouraging them to start, whether it's at McDonald's, whether it's at Carl's Jr., so that they can get some work history going. And so that's important for them to get started somewhere so that they can start getting that work history going, and then they can look at moving farther up.
Yeah, that is a really great idea, and no, it's not something that we are doing at the present time. What we do have, though, the Brother Francis shelter, we sleep about 240 people there every night, and within that shelter, there's a program called the in-house program. So there are about 50 jobs within the shelter that we need help to make sure that that shelter runs. And those jobs are open to the guests that stay at the shelter. So what it does for them is a few things. It provides them with some job experience. So like we have jobs in our kitchen, we have maintenance jobs, we have them help us with checking people into the shelter at night. And then they get some perks out of that as well. So for those of you who've never been at the shelter, at night we put mats on the floor, right? So we also have 2 dorms. So if you have an in-house job, you automatically get a bed in the dorm, and it gives you the security then of having an assigned bed, so you know you have a place every single night. You're not waiting in line to see, you know, make sure that you get a spot, because sometimes we reach capacity and we have to turn people away. So it's a great opportunity for them to get some security and stability within the shelter itself, to get some job experience, and then like you said as well, just that piece about kind of accountability, right? They have to show up for their job, they have to do a good job, and they have to report to a supervisor within that piece as well. So that's a piece that we do try to help people get a little more job ready with.
Well, we are at the mission, but not everybody that we work with stays at the mission. But we do have different programs at our mission. We have dorms for the programmers, which is the grant per diem, which is the transitional. We have a recycle program where they can go into the recycle program and get job work there as well. But we also, if they're staying at the mission, they have work pay, where if they do 2 hours worth of work, then they can stay for free for that day. But if not, then they can pay. If they're out working and can't do the work pay, then they pay for that day. They do get 10 days free stay at the mission, but after that point, then they need to be in a program, or they need to be doing some chores and stuff, because we don't have enough staff to do everything. And so we want them to have that stability as well if they're at the mission. But not everybody in our program stays at the mission. There may be people that are living in their car, or, you know, they're in the camps and this. So for those people, we're really encouraging them to try to get out and get employment. But if they are at the mission, then we want them to be looking for work as well.
All right. Unfortunately, we've hit our time. No, John, you got a quick question? Yeah.
Just a quick one. Just wondering if any of you have any experience partnering with either tribal entities or tribal housing authorities for rapid rehousing.
We do, and again, come to the next session when we do case studies. That'll be answered in some more detail.
We work with FNA and TCC. They do have programs there individually, but you know, we try to work together as much as possible.
Yeah, the same would go for us as well, and we do have the project right now with the Cook Inlet Housing Authority.
And just one more thing before we leave. If you haven't already filled out your ballot for the AKCH2 board election, please do so. It's due by 10 o'clock, so that'd be at the end of this next break. Other than that, I'm sure that the folks up here. Well, first off, thank you so much for presenting, especially if it was last second. And again, thanks everybody for the great questions and for participating. And fill out those ballots and please give them to the ballot box. All right, thank you.